If you walked into a room and completely forgotten why, or you've noticed your eyes need a few extra seconds to focus on words that used to jump right off the page, you're not imagining it, and you're not alone. Research on aging suggests that changes like these become noticeably more common after 60. Here's the more hopeful part: there's a simple, inexpensive food that keeps showing up in studies about aging brains and aging eyes, and by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why researchers keep paying attention to it. This one's for you if you're past 60 yourself, or if you're the one quietly watching out for a parent, a spouse, or someone you love who's reaching that stage of life. If you've ever paused mid-sentence trying to find a word that used to come easily, or blinked a little harder to bring something into focus, stay with me, because what we're about to cover touches both of those moments, and it's simpler than you'd expect. Think about an ordinary morning. You're making tea, you glance at the clock, and for a second the number doesn't quite register the way it used to. Or you're reading the paper and catch yourself holding it a little further away, waiting for the letters to settle. Small, almost forgettable moments. But underneath them is something real. As the years add up, blood flow slows slightly, cells repair themselves a touch less efficiently, and the brain and the eyes, both of which depend on a steady supply of oxygen and nutrients, tend to feel that shift first. Quietly, a lot of people carry the same worry: will I stay sharp, and will I keep seeing clearly, for as long as I want to? Here's the food worth knowing about: raisins. Yes, the small, wrinkled-dried grapes that have probably been sitting in your pantry for years, the ones that get tossed into oatmeal or eaten by the handful without much thought. There's a reason researchers studying aging brains and aging eyes keep circling back to this exact dried fruit, and it isn't really about sugar or sweetness at all. It comes down to a few quiet, overlooked compounds working together, and one of them in particular might surprise you. We'll get there. Let's start with what raisins are most studied for: their antioxidant content. Raisins are naturally rich in polyphenol, plant compounds that research suggests may help the body manage oxidative stress, which is essentially the wear and tear that gradually builds up inside cells over time. The brain and the eyes are especially sensitive to this kind of wear, because both organs use an unusually large amount of oxygen and energy just to keep functioning normally, day after day. A small serving of raisins, roughly a quarter cup, provides a concentrated dose of these plant compounds, more than you might expect from something so simple and inexpensive. This isn't about erasing the aging process, nobody can honestly promise that. It's about giving the body a few more tools to manage that process a little more gracefully, one ordinary snack at a time. Think of it less like a switch being flipped and more like adding a small amount of support to a system that's been working hard for 60+ years. Some researchers specifically point to the retina and to brain tissue as two of the most metabolically active parts of the body, which is exactly why they're often among the first places where this kind of everyday cellular wear becomes noticeable to the person living inside that body. Now here's a question worth sitting with for a second. When was the last time you actually looked at what's already in your kitchen and asked, is this helping me, or is it just filling space? Because often the most useful foods aren't the exotic ones flown in from halfway around the world, they're the ordinary ones that have been sitting in the cupboard the whole time. The second thing worth knowing about raisins is that they're one of the more concentrated natural sources of a trace mineral called boron, something almost nobody talks about at the dinner table. A handful of studies looking at older adults have examined how boron intake relates to brainwave activity and performance on cognitive tests, with some research pointing to modestly better attention and short-term memory scores in adults who had adequate boron in their diet compared with those who didn't. It's not a dramatic effect, and no honest researcher would call it one. It looks more like quiet, background support, a mineral doing steady work without asking for credit. What makes this interesting is how few common foods actually contain meaningful amounts of boron, which is part of why raisins specifically keep coming up in this area of research rather than dried fruit in general. Boron is also involved in how the body handles other minerals like calcium and magnesium, which is part of why some researchers suspect its role may reach beyond bone health and into areas like cognitive function, even though this particular area of study is still fairly young. And here's where it gets genuinely interesting, because boron doesn't appear to work in isolation. Researchers believe it may interact with other nutrients involved in maintaining healthy blood vessels, And that detail is what actually ties the brain and the eyes together in this conversation. It's the part almost nobody watching this has thought about before, the idea that the very same blood vessels responsible for your eyesight are, in many ways, doing the same job for your memory. Raisins also carry a meaningful amount of potassium, a mineral well known for supporting healthy blood pressure. Here's why that detail matters so much after 60. Both the brain and the eyes rely entirely on small, delicate blood vessels to deliver oxygen and nutrients, every minute of every day, without exception. When blood pressure stays within a healthy range, those small vessels stay under less strain over time. Research has connected healthy blood pressure levels with better long-term outcomes for both cognitive function and eye health. And here's the part that's genuinely easy to miss: the brain and the eyes are, in a very real sense, fed by the same kind of vascular system. What supports one, in a lot of cases, quietly ends up supporting the other too. That's not a coincidence, and it's not marketing language, it's simply how the circulatory system works. A food that gently supports healthy blood pressure isn't targeting one organ, it's supporting the entire network those organs depend on. It's also part of why some eye doctors ask about blood pressure numbers during a routine eye exam, not just at a heart checkup, because the connection between the two is something specialists take seriously even when patients don't expect the question. Let that sit for a second. The brain and the eyes are not two separate stories. They're connected by the same blood vessels, the same daily supply chain, every single day of your life. One more piece worth mentioning is iron. Raisins contain a modest but genuinely useful amount of it, and iron plays a direct role in helping oxygen travel through the bloodstream to the tissues that need it most, brain tissue very much included. Low iron levels have been associated in research with feelings of fatigue and difficulty concentrating, the kind of foggy, slow feeling a lot of people quietly chalk up to just getting older. It isn't always just aging. Sometimes it's a nutrient gap, and sometimes a nutrient gap is something a small, consistent dietary change can help address, without needing a dramatic overhaul of how you eat. Iron gaps also tend to be more common in older adults than most people assume, partly because appetite and eating patterns naturally shift with age, and a smaller, less varied plate can quietly let gaps like this one slip in unnoticed. A food that's easy to add without changing much else, like raisins, can be one simple way to help close that kind of gap. Now, you might be thinking, don't raisins have a lot of sugar? That's a fair question, and it deserves an honest answer rather than a dismissive one. Raisins do contain natural sugar, and it's more concentrated than in fresh grapes simply because the water has been removed, so portion matters here. A small handful, not a full bag, is the idea, and pairing raisins with a source of protein or fiber, like a spoonful of plain yogurt or a few unsalted nuts, can help slow down how quickly that sugar is absorbed into the bloodstream. This isn't a food to build an entire day of eating around, and nobody should treat it that way. It's a small, intentional addition to an already balanced plate, nothing more dramatic than that. For most healthy adults, a small, near-daily portion fits comfortably within general dietary guidelines, though anyone managing diabetes or a specific medical condition should always check with their own doctor first, since individual needs vary. A lot of people ask how to actually fit this into daily life without overthinking it, and honestly, it doesn't need to be complicated. Some people stir a small spoonful into their morning oatmeal, others toss a few into a bowl of yogurt, or keep a small container by the front door as a grab-and-go snack instead of something processed. A few tablespoons, a few times a week, is a realistic, sustainable goal, not a strict daily requirement you have to track on a chart. The idea isn't to make raisins the centerpiece of your diet, it's to let them sit quietly alongside everything else you're already doing right: the walks, the water, the sleep, all of it working together rather than any single food carrying the whole weight on its own. Some people even portion out small containers in advance, so a single serving is always within reach without needing to think twice about it. So if there's one point from this entire video worth holding on to, it isn't the antioxidants, and it isn't even the boron. It's this: the brain and the eyes age together, fed by the same blood vessels, shaped by many of the same daily habits, and raisins happen to touch several of the factors: healthy blood pressure, oxidative stress, and oxygen delivery, that influence both of them at once. That overlap is the detail that's easy to miss, because most people treat brain health and eye health as two completely separate conversations, when research increasingly suggests they're far more connected than that, sharing the same quiet infrastructure underneath everything else. If that connected a few dots for you, do me a favor and hit subscribe, because we cover one simple, research-informed food or habit like this every single week, specifically for people who want to stay sharp and independent as the years go on. And I'd genuinely like to know, what's one small food already sitting in your kitchen that you now realize might be doing more for you than you gave it credit for? Drop it in the comments, I read through every one of them. And if this video changed how you think about your pantry, the next one breaks down 3 ordinary morning habits that may be quietly affecting your memory before you've even left the house. That one's worth watching too. At the end of the day, a small handful of raisins isn't a cure, and it isn't a shortcut. Nobody should tell you it is. But the research around how it may support both your brain and your eyes over time, together, quietly, is genuinely worth paying attention to. Sometimes the most powerful changes in life aren't the dramatic ones. They're the small, quiet ones you choose again and again, one ordinary handful at a time, for as long as you keep choosing them,